Welcome to our daily Forex market analysis call, and this is in preparation for trading on January 26, 2018. Just a quick disclaimer before we get started. This is for education purposes only. Trading is a risky business, especially with all the volatility that's in the market right now. So please be very careful with your money, and it's very important to keep your risk small and the trade size, the position size small as well. All right, so we shall get started with first, let's take a look at Forex Factory here. So the biggest thing today was around, it was about ECB. So we saw a huge amount of volatility. We saw Euro take off like crazy, and then it dropped. And in fact, we closed the day as a big daily pin bar here. So the reason that happened was because when the meeting minutes kind of come out, the policy comes out, in that case, they didn't really have much guidance. It didn't really, change anything. As a result, we saw Euro drop and Euro Yen dropped. But then when the conference started, the press conference started, we saw it shoot up like crazy. And then after that, it collapsed. And this is, I was actually expecting it to come down. And the reason for that is, so right now with the continued drama that's politically that's going on in the market, there will be a concern from other countries essentially because their currencies are going up so much. So at the World Economic Forum meetings that have been, that are being held or have been being held this week, we saw a lot of comments coming from different people. And one of the comments that came out from the U.S. representative, Munchkin, right? Sorry if I kind of butchered that name. But what he said was essentially that the weaker U.S. dollar is good for trade because it's good for exports. And that has been the stance that President Trump has taken up until now, right from the very beginning of his presidency. The first words that came out of his mouth in regards to the interest rate and to the currency was that we need a weaker dollar. And the reason he wants a weaker dollar is because then it makes exports better because people want to import them. If the US dollar is too high, nobody would want to import anything from the US. So US instead will be importing stuff from others. But when the US dollar drops, it becomes better economically for other countries to be able to afford the stuff that the U.S. produces. And that's what's been going on. And that's why the U.S. dollar has actually been weak in spite of, plus, with the data and everything else. But that has been one of the big reasons U.S. dollar hasn't really shown a lot of strength during the President Trump's presidency. So now, one of the things that would be a concern for everybody else is because their currencies have gone up so much. So when different other currencies go up like that, it's a concern for them because that impacts their imports. So if euro is very expensive, people don't want to, buy European stuff because to be able to buy European stuff, they have to convert the currency and buy euros, and euro is expensive. So they're basically getting, less than what they used to for the same amount of euros. So that's a concern, and that's why I was expecting a lot of volatility in the market, but also I was expecting the euro to drop because they would have to come back and start sort of talking it down. And that's what Munchkin did at the World Economic Forum. And we saw the US dollar dropping. Plus, of course, the US dollar also dropped because of the government shutdown and stuff like that. But recently this week, that was one of the reasons his comments were negative for the US dollar. And so it makes sense that other countries would start basically jawboning and start saying things to drive their currencies down. And that's essentially what Draghi came and said. He said that they expect the interest rates to remain at their present levels, and the euro, the interest rate is at 0. So if they continue to stay low, whereas the US dollar, or if you sort of have your money in the US, then you're getting a better interest rate than if you have it in the euros. It makes sense for people to actually, prefer buying the US dollar as opposed to the euros. So that's what's going on from fundamental perspective, and that's why we saw that big drop after the sizable move up. We saw the big drop. So that's what's going on. Earlier, another EU representative had actually said that we should start providing forward guidance in terms of the interest rate, and that had pushed the euro up as well, because what the market expected from that, or took from that comment, was that maybe they will start talking about raising interest rates. But with the strength in the euro, it makes sense for Draghi to try to drive the euro down through his comments. So that's what's going on in terms of the euro. And then we also saw President Trump kind of offer completely opposite statement to what his stance has been up until now. And what he said was that dollar is going to get stronger, and ultimately he wants to see a strong dollar, which is completely opposite to what he has been saying so far. So this is what this comment here, Mnuchin, was misinterpreted, was that, so Mnuchin repeated what President Trump has said, but then President Trump came and said completely opposite of what he said. So anyway, so he negated Mnuchin's comments, and that also led to the US dollar strength. So when President Trump says he thinks US dollar will go up, so that kind of pushes it up, because now he's not trying to talk it down. So what I'm saying is, over the coming weeks, we may see those butting of heads. And then Japan also had comments on targeting FX rates. So Japan finance minister, he was saying that they should target G7 agreement, not to target FX rates. So everybody tries to sort of talk their currency down, and as the currencies, everything starts getting more expensive against the US dollar. I think we'll see more of that, and we may be seeing a turning point in the strength of other currencies. So again, that's kind of what's going on from the fundamentals perspective. So we have to see it play out in the real life. So tomorrow we could see things drop. So keep that in mind. Oh, excuse me, sorry, coughing there. Okay, as far as Friday goes, we will get some preliminary GDP numbers from British Pound and also from the US. So those numbers will be important for both the countries, because those numbers are or play an important role in how the central banks will decide whether the data is coming up, so interest rates should be raised or not. And the CPI number for Canada. So Canada is another country besides US that has been raising rates. And at this point, Canada is in an interesting situation, because Canada has been raising rates. But now, if they raise rates too quickly, then it will have a negative impact on the economy. So I think the Bank of Canada will start to kind of do the same thing, because then Canadian exports become too expensive, and Canada is an export-driven economy, because the population isn't that big to support everything. So Canada needs to export stuff, just like Australia and New Zealand. So I think that different countries are going to start making verbal comments to drive the FX market. So we may see pullbacks tomorrow and into the next week as well. So having said that, let's go and take a look at the charts. This is our Euro US dollar. As we can see, we have a big pin bar on the daily. So I am expecting the price to drop, and the target will be the top of this level here, 123.20 level. So I'm looking for price to push up higher, potentially into this pivot point, or even higher into this previous support and resistance area here or slightly higher actually. So let's say 1.2460 or 70 level, around this area is where I'm expecting the price to potentially pull back to and then drop. So kind of like this, and looking for it to come into this S1 level, which is at 123.20. So I'm looking for a drop in price, so the bias is to the downside. Pound yen. So pound, we had a nice double top, and as we can see after President Trump's comments or with the ECB, we saw a big drop in this as well. And I think that may be that is likely to be the theme going forward, if nothing else changes with currently the way things are. But we have seen a huge move to the upside. So as we can see, after a huge move to the upside here, we saw a drop. So we have another huge move to the upside. So now I'm looking for pullback in these pairs. And that's why I was looking for this morning, trading the London session, I was looking for prices to start pulling back. But again, when we have a major announcement coming up like ECB, markets tend to be sideways prior to that, and that's what we saw in the London session. But in terms of our bias here, that's a big drop. I'm expecting the price to drop from that, so bias is to the downside. And in terms of our targets, the first target would be 140.80, and second target, we can pull this up a bit. So the second target, it could even be in the at the base of this. So 1.400 will be the second target. And if you take a look here, so we could either go into the pivot point, which we are pretty much there like that, or we could see a deeper pullback here back into this support and resistance area, giving us a sort of a head and shoulders type of formation, and then a drop from there. So that's what I am looking for, but I am looking for a further pullback for both euro and pound. Same thing for Aussie here, big pullback, and now I'm looking for a drop. The target would be 79.95. No, sorry, 79.55. So 79.50. And in terms of the pullback, so the bias is to the downside here. That's a big bearish candle. And here, so we could pull back into this level, which is our pivot point, which makes sense because we are looking for price to drop. So we could do one of these, or we could do a head and shoulders type of formation like this and then see a drop. But whether we are looking at 80 level or we are looking at 80.50 level, the bias is still to the downside after the price has pulled back, because our daily close is quite bearish here. So I'm looking for it to drop. New Zealand dollar, similar situation here. This one, see how we had a pin bar? This is exactly what it looks like in the euro right now. So, well, maybe not as big a candle body, but we have a big rejection pin up top. And as we saw from New Zealand, we had a big rejection pin. So it was a huge pin, and then we had a bearish candle close. So that's a very nice pin bar, and we have another nice pin bar. So based on this, I am expecting price to drop. So we could get some really nice moves tomorrow. So just watch out for that. But in terms of our targets, so I'm looking at about 72.50 level. 72.50 level will be my target to the downside, but overall we have two pins back to back, so this is bearish. Dollar CAD, we have a bullish candle close. So in this case, it's at an interesting level. So we are back into this previous support, which is acting as resistance, and this is at 1.2380. So if the price stays below 123.80, then we are likely to see a drop here. But this is a bullish pin bar. And if the price kind of breaks above that 123.80 level, then I'm looking for price to pull all the way up into 12500 level. So we'll have this one. We kind of need to watch and see how things play out. So that will be important. Okay, Euro Swiss franc, this was a big drop. So it has broken that trend line. It has been following this trend line to the upside for quite some time. And I think this is another pair where we could get a nice move to the downside tomorrow. So with this one, I'm expecting it to do a test like that and then drop. So the target here would be 1.1587. So let's say 1.1600 level. So 1.1600 will be the target to the downside, but the bias is certainly to the downside, and I'm looking for a drop. Pound yen, a huge move to the downside. With this one as well, I'm looking for a further move to the downside. And in this case, looking for price to pull back and then do a drop like that. So 1.3200 will be the target to the downside. And this is certainly looking bearish as well. That's a big engulfing candle. So certainly a bearish move is to be expected. Dollar Swiss franc, that has been a massive drop. So we saw a drop and then the flag formation and then continuation move to the downside. So this looks like a bearish move as well. So we have price testing the pin to pin test here, which is also our previous support level, now turning into resistance. And now we are already starting to see the move to the downside in dollar yen. So I am looking for price to drop to 93.20 level. So dollar Swiss franc, the bias is to the downside. Pound CAD here, nice bearish close, but we are into support here. So if the price is not able to break 174.65 level, then it could continue back up higher. But based on the daily close, I'm looking for price to drop, and 1.7340 will be the target to the downside. So the bias is bearish for this. Pound yen, we've had a drop here. And now price is, so based on the daily candle close, my bias will be to the downside. But do keep in mind, it is into support right here, which is coming from previous resistance. So we do need to see a break of 154.50. But overall, based on the daily candle close, the bias is to the downside. So this was a trade that we had taken, but see how price pushed up during that volatility in the market. So we kind of closed out the trade prior to price pushed up here. But this is why, because the volatility in the market from ECB can be quite strong. So we did see that push up, and then out of Draghi, once he can express concerns about the euro. But he didn't expect concerns of the euro strength, but he mentioned, the interest rates will be staying at the current levels. So that kind of drove everything down, and that's where we saw this nice pin bar. And from there, we have seen a nice drop back into our resistance, turning into support. So in this case here, I would look for a trade setup at R1 level here like this, looking for price to drop. Or it could just stay at this current level. So if you take a look at this, this is a nice support and resistance area where it is currently, and we could just see a drop from there. So based on daily candle close, my bias is to the downside, but caution would be 154.50 area. So we need to see price break below this area for it to really turn completely bearish. But for now, I'm looking for price to come and test 154.50 will be the first target. Second target would be 153.100. So that will be the second price target. Euro yen, we saw a huge push to the upside. We are still in that range bound market here. As we can see, price has been stuck at this level forever. So if it doesn't break up high, it doesn't break the high, chances are it will drop. So in this case, I would look for a retest of the high, either this high or the high above 136.70. So I'm looking for a retest, and if the price doesn't drop, sorry, if price doesn't break through to the upside, I'm looking for a drop. So looking for a double top formation, either at the high of the range here or at the high of the pin. But the bias here, we have a completely, essentially we have had a very, very neutral close here for the candle. So if it doesn't break the high, I'm looking for it to drop. And it's kind of taken its sweet time trying to break the high, and it hasn't. So that will be what I'd be looking for. Aussie Yen here. Aussie Yen, very, very nice double top a few days ago. Since then, we have been bearish on this, and now I'm looking for another move to the downside here. The target still is 87.20. We haven't quite reached that. It's usually a slow moving pair. So I'm looking for price to drop further. 87.20 is the target. Dollar yen here. Dollar yen actually pushed up higher here. So for this one, we could see price go into 109.87 level or even 107.80. So we're kind of pretty much there. So I'm looking for price to, this is interesting. So we have had a bullish candle close, but if the price is not able to break 109.80, then, and other yen crosses start to drop, I would be looking for this type of a move. So looking for price to drop, but we have to be careful with this one, because if the other US dollar crosses start to drop, it could push the US dollar up. So I would be cautious with dollar yen, because other yen crosses are looking bearish. So the problem will be a tug of war between US dollar and Japanese yen. So we'll have to be careful with this one. So if dollar starts to drop, this is likely to drop as well. But careful will be the word. This one here, a very neutral close. So probably not the best one to trade at this point. Hasn't really done much. We have been bearish on this for the last couple of days, but it hasn't been able to break this level. Sorry, 1 second. So if it cannot, so my bias is still to the downside, because the overall bias is to the downside. So I'm looking for a retest of this 88.00 level. And if it doesn't break the low here, then we could see a double bottom and then a potential move to the upside. But for now, overall bias is to the downside. So I'm looking for price to retest 88.00 level. All right, so that's all I have for today. Any questions or comments? Today we went on a little bit longer because we were talking about the fundamentals, but hopefully that you guys found that useful. So that's all I have. Anything to add? Okay, perfect. So nothing else. So we'll call it a wrap. You guys have a wonderful evening, and I will see you tomorrow for our trade room webinar. Okay, good night, everyone. Bye for now.